Welcome to
What a block!
Triple Blockheads,
Back set, block down.
the podcast for all things volleyball.
Aloha all, and welcome to another episode of Triple Blockheads. Makani here with Frank and Marc. And on today's episode, we are going to jump into the topic of specialization. So should I just play volleyball or should I be a multi-sport athlete? And what are the complexities of that? But really where all of that conversation really starts in sport specialization, Frank, is kind of in this club space where you have high school and you'll have club kind of converging together. What type of conversations are you having with your athletes as you go through the recruitment process of club, but also during the season with having multi-sport athletes?
I think in the volleyball space, we all recognize that it starts with club volleyball, and I think we get a lot of the blame for it. I think some of that is justified. I think our situation's unique, and I think a lot of club situations are kind of like this too. It just really starts with where you're at, what city you're in, what's your demographics. For us, we're in the Quad Cities of Illinois and Iowa, kind of right on the Mississippi River. So it's a relatively small community in comparison to other massive volleyball clubs who are in Dallas, Chicago, Minneapolis is the big metro cities. So for us, our smaller community base, we got a lot of small high schools around us. And those small high schools are counting on their best athletes to play all the sports that they offer at those schools. They are almost they are depending on those athletes to be able to field those teams. So most of our club, about 85% of our athletes, are all playing 2 or 3 other sports. They're playing, softball, basketball, everything. And they kind of have to. Their schools are depending on them. And those kids, they thrive on school spirit, representing their schools. There's a lot of pride, I think, in our community about that. So, for us, we kind of have to support our athletes and all the other stuff they're doing, or we probably don't have a volleyball club. I think if you're a club director in a big city, your challenges are probably a little bit different. I'm assuming that those high schools around those big cities are pretty big. You got a lot of kids playing a lot of different sports who are probably specializing pretty early. But for us, we've always supported the multi-sport kid. I feel like that's just every kid in our community, and we really value. I think it's one of the things that sets us apart is that we are trying to partner with that kid and their family and just providing support in whatever way we can to allow that kid to play basketball, to run track, to, play softball. And, our philosophy on it is pretty simple. We want that kid to enjoy coming to the volleyball gym. We want them to feel like it's a place that they're supported. We are lucky enough to have our own space. So if a kid can only be in the volleyball gym on Wednesdays, but that's not the day that she practices on, we're totally cool with her hopping in and practicing with the 14s or 15s team. We think that's actually great for our culture to allow those kids to meet different kids and to be more than just one participant on one team. We think that stuff's really cool. And we talked about in earlier episodes, we are counting on people who graduate from the program to eventually, hopefully, come back to the gym and coach if that's something they want to get into. And I think those kids understand the culture better than most new coaches coming in who haven't maybe played or been around the gym, because those kids created the culture back in the day. And I think it's easier to sustain that culture if there's a general vibe of support. And multi-sport stuff, specialization, that is the toughest challenge. And so if you can help those kids deal with the toughest challenge, I think that's a great way to foster a long-term relationship with that kid. Mm-hmm. But that's our market. Our market's small, and you got big markets who, that kid maybe doesn't want to play any other sports because of the accessibility in that area. And so they're all in on playing volleyball only from the from as a 12, 13-year-old. And, I'm sure Marc's got some great, feedback on the recruiting trail, like what those kids look like when they're 17, 18, when they start playing, when was volleyball the only thing they were playing, and then what does their ceiling look like by the time they're finishing college, And I believe that, like, if that kid's doing multiple things throughout their prep career, their ceiling is so much higher by the time they get to college, and they haven't even begun to really tap into their specialization, like, grind essentially. But that's our side. Like, we support it. Like, that's our community. But we see a lot of clubs that maybe don't do that too.
I think an interesting component to that is the two-way street, right? It's not just you approaching it from the club side, but there's also the high school implication. As a former high school coach and now club director, what does that balance look like? What are some of those conversations, and maybe what are some of the difficult conversations when it feels a bit one-sided one way or the other?
Yeah, I think, I just think if we can put ourselves in their shoes, like, we can answer those questions so much easier. Like, when I coached high school for a couple of years, and we had a small high school, 600 kids in the high school. Volleyball team was really good. We had some great athletes, but a lot of those kids weren't going to play volleyball in college. They were going to play soccer or run track. And there were tournaments that we had in high school where this kid had a soccer showcase, and she's asking me what she should do. I was like, like, if this showcase is going to be a major factor into you extending your career into college and what you want to play, you should go do that. Like, we're not going to state playoffs. We're just going to a tournament. This is a great opportunity for someone else in our team where opportunity meets preparation, right? There's so many positive dynamics you can pull from that situation instead of just thinking about the one kid who, is going through that decision. So it's an easy decision for me because I'm just, like, putting myself in their shoes. If I was them and I was in that situation, like, how would I want to be supported? And I think that kid then comes back to your team and plays organically so much harder because they feel so much more supported.
I'm assuming that the multi-sport question happens in the recruitment process, I think, a lot from either the player or the parents, right? When they're saying, hey, you're offering them a spot on X team, the question maybe next is, hey, she's a multi-sport athlete. She's really good. She's a starting center in basketball or a pitcher in softball. When you have to help facilitate that conversation with that high school coach, whatever sport that is, what are some things that, we can tell the listeners that worked or helped kind of bridge the gap and made it a little easier? Because not every high school coach is going to be as accommodating as what you were in your few years coaching high school volleyball with soccer players or basketball players, right? So, tell us about your experience of things that went well. Like, how did you bridge that gap?
Yeah, I don't know if I've actually reached out to, like, a kid's high school coach. I feel like, I don't know. I just worked, like, directly with,
or even coaching the parents, like, how
to
approach it.
I just tell them, like, hey, here's how we can support it, like, and we try to do all that before we commit to a team so that they understand at least our situation and what we could do to help navigate that. But they still have to go back to the high school coach and try to see if there's anything there. But I think even if the high school coach is like, you can't miss any practice or any tournaments, it's like, all right, that's it's out of our control, but here's what we can control.
Right.
We can control still getting you in the gym. We're just lucky to have our own space where if that kid wants to come in the gym at 6 a.m. to serve balls, like, we can do that, and that's us, I think, maximizing our space and maximizing our, like, support level for that kid. Yeah.
I think at the same periods of time, right? Maybe not early club, but as they're getting into more of that prospect age group, into the juniors, sophomore, junior, senior, obviously, that same question that multi-sport question to the club is now being directed to the collegiate side, right? Is, hey, you're recruiting me. What do you think of me being a multi-sport athlete? So just curious on your thoughts, Marc.
Yeah, from the recruitment side, I think there's a lot of advantages to being a multi-sport athlete and what it can do for your body, what it does for your muscle development, If you specialize in volleyball specifically, sometimes we're seeing running into some like overuse injuries because you're constantly working those exact same muscle groups over and over and over. Whereas if you're a multi-sport athlete, some things that we'll see as more just overall definition, the ability to make maybe more jerk reaction moves look a bit more fluid. It's just an understanding of different biomechanics on how your body moves that you get through your soccer experience or your basketball experience that maybe you wouldn't get as much organically from a volleyball perspective. One parallel I like to draw is shooting a layup in basketball is very similar to your slide approach. And if you don't, or if you high jump, right, and you're used to taking things off one foot, that can definitely translate to a very specific volleyball skill that maybe doesn't come as easy if you don't have the background in that other sport or that biomechanical process. So I think that those are important things when you're developing an athlete. I encourage everybody as a youth to play multiple sports. One, to find your passion and find what you love, and two, to have the full development of motor skills, foot-eye coordination, hand-eye coordination, speed, agility, left hand, right hand, all that stuff is really important to an athlete's development as a whole, even beyond just being really good at volleyball specifically. Now, there probably is a point, right, where we want to focus a little bit more. If that's what we're going to be doing at the next level, we got to turn our attention. I think from our perspective, we're not going to sway anyone to do one or the other, but no one's naive enough to think that it doesn't weigh into decision making. You know what I mean? If you are an elite basketball player and volleyball and you play both and play club both and travel both, ultimately, if we offer you that scholarship or where we decide you're going to join our team or you commit to being on our team, that's a conversation that we'll have, not to influence, but to gain kind of that perspective of where you're at, where the focus lies for you, and whether or not that fits with what we want as a program. I fully support it in most cases. I've found through working with multi-sport athletes that they're able to make different technical changes a little bit easier at times just because of a broader understanding of sport. As somebody who didn't play collegiate volleyball myself, I draw a lot of training parallels from other sports. So having that background knowledge in the parallel I'm trying to draw can definitely help in that learning process, where if I've never thrown a football or thrown softball or whatever it is, we might not be able to make those biomechanical connections in the same way.
Yeah, I think those multi-sport athletes, because of those different types of movements in those different sports, really, they do have more. They tend to have a quicker change mechanism, right? When you're asking them to do something different, it's almost like they can refer back to another muscle movement that's similar, because it's not always just the one volleyball movement that they've been doing, that muscle memory every single time. So which brings me back to, from a club perspective, away from now that you have the multi-sport athlete in your club and on your team, talk about some of the advantages that you do see as those multi-sport athletes are developing at that age group.
My analogies work a lot better when they know what a layup is. I just think you see progress actually a little bit faster, and I think by the time they get to high school and they're starting to approach pretty complex, technique understandings of how to run a slide or how to run a bic or stuff that's a little more complex. I think, like Marc said, like there's just so many parallels to other parts of other different sports that they're playing. I think maybe Marc can talk more about this too. Like, I just really think that by the time they graduate high school, if they are involved in like one other thing, basketball or something, like they just haven't even touched the ceiling yet of how much quicker they still can get better once they get into college.
That's probably true. I think the multi-sport athlete is maybe more raw. As we
Yeah,
like
maybe
to
more raw. That's a
call
good way
it,
to put
like
it.
less,
Less polished.
less polished in volleyball specifically, but generally the athlete is more well-rounded. So
Is that something
it's
you
kind of
guys like note? Like when you're evaluating a kid and you know they're a multi-sport kid, is that something you note? Like, oh, their ceiling's probably higher because they're not like all in on volleyball yet.
I think judging the ceiling is an important recruiting tool regardless
Yeah.
of whether they're multi-sport or not. We're always looking at a kid and trying to predict
Potential.
right where she's going to be in 4 years versus
For sure.
where she's at right now or where she is in the next year. So that's got to weigh into it, right? How high is the ceiling? And I think knowing the type of athlete behind that makes that distinguishment a little bit easier
Yep.
than the opposite, I guess.
Yeah. And the same thing for us in club. Like we have a 17-year-old, for example, and she's been playing club volleyball with us since she was 12. And there's a new kid that comes in who's 17, hasn't played club yet, and a little more raw, but like we see it as, oh wow, she hasn't even like played a club season yet. Like this kid's gonna get so much better in a quick amount of time. And sometimes we'll put that raw kid on a higher level team than the kid who we think is maybe almost capped out on where she's at.
Talk a little bit about some of the intangibles, Mark. So non-volleyball related. Do you see in multi-sport athletes, do they tend to gravitate to their teammates because they're on more teams? I mean, just by sheer count, right? They have different teammates. They have to make different relationships. They potentially have to lead in different ways on those teams. Sometimes they're a leader maybe they're the best volleyball player, captain, leader. Maybe they're just a role player on the basketball team or the softball team. And I don't know if you have any thoughts or even Frank on how that changes, or how that impacts.
I think part of it is whatever sport you played, right? If you were doing another team sport like a soccer or basketball, or you played golf and tennis, you know what I mean? So advantages to both of those things. I've found that multi-team sports knows how to maneuver the relationships and that dynamic of different teams a little bit better just through experience and more rather than playing with the same group exclusively, right? You get to know those players intimately, but not necessarily how to maneuver through unfamiliar situations in the same way. The advantages of participating in a solo sport like a tennis or a golf is the mental component of the game, right? Now you know how to better combat your self-talk and maybe your approach to a game whenever you can't feed off of a teammate's energy in that same way. Adds to a lot of potential problem-solving advantages that maybe a specialized volleyball player might not have in that same light.
Right.
Yeah, I had coached a player when I was coaching high school who was a state champion tennis player. And she was a role player in our high school team, but we got to the state tournament and who ended up being our best server under pressure was our state champion tennis player. Who had just
done that.
Who had just been there, done that. Yeah, like, oh, this court's actually bigger than a tennis court. But like, it shouldn't have been a huge surprise because she was used to those moments in just a different capacity. Yeah. But it was the same moments as she had in tennis. And like another, I think, interesting comparison is like a basketball player. Like, you can get absolutely annihilated in the first half of a basketball game, and they come back out at halftime. It's like, oh, we have to like find a way to come back from this massive deficit. But in volleyball, if that kid plays volleyball, they're like, oh, the score starts over after a set 0-0 again. Like, bouncing back is probably a little bit easier for that kid mentally than having to do that in a basketball game where the deficit is so much different.
I think so. A little off script. We didn't really talk about this, but we talk a lot about the multi-sport athlete and the value of being a multi-sport athlete. I mean, there is value obviously in being a specialized athlete in those situations if that's what you want as an athlete. But I also think not lost on that is some of the benefits of playing other sports or even getting experiences with elasticity and muscle memory and all those types of things. any tips for clubs and our club players or developing players and prospects and parents on how you can do that if your athlete isn't into playing another sport?
100%. I think there's a ton of parallels to be drawn, or even ways to train when you're at home to incorporate other sports involved. I think a great way is throwing a football. So if you're in the backyard just throwing a football, you're actually working on your swing mechanics. Biomechanically, they are very similar motions. It's a front foot, it's a weight transfer, it's a high elbow release, that follow through motion. All of those tie and correlate directly into volleyball. So I think it's looking for those sorts of opportunities to incorporate some other sport training or some other muscle group training into your volleyball training work that you do. Like if you are specifically a volleyball player and that's where you've committed, you'd be doing yourself a disservice to not find ways to activate those other muscle groups and elasticity to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think club coaches were trying to always keep things fresh. So, like, maybe a great warm-up game is, like, go play some spike ball or something. You know, you're still getting a lot of the similar lateral movements. Angle patterns are kind of similar. And you're just playing something that's a little bit different, you know. Or, you know, we play, like, a fun game of golf where, like, you let the kids create different holes. And, like, this hole one, you've got to hit the antenna off of a serve and however many tries, that's how many strokes it was. But like, if you're trying to keep things fresh, I think we all are trying to keep things fresh in the gym. Like, can you combine some different movements and add some like competitive component to it, so that you know just not always doing your same warm up every day. Which there's good stuff to that, but yeah, how do you mix in some cross training inside of your volleyball practice?
I think a really important component of something Frank just mentioned is finding ways to teach kids how to compete overall more than just compete in a volleyball sense.
For sure.
So there's a ton of benefit in setting up a silly game and just manipulating one rule from it and having the kids have to work through, okay, how do I gain an advantage in this game? How do I actually win the game that I'm in right now, which might be different from the game that I'm in later, but getting the ability to think critically at an early age will help them be successful across all sports that they want to be in. And I would argue life overall, right? Being able to figure out where your advantage lies and how to succeed. If you're approaching that from a lot of different perspectives, that makes it more beneficial.
Yeah, and man, it's hard. It's so hard in the club world to like promote it. It's so hard because I feel like a lot of us as clubs, we're being judged based on the success that we have in tournaments or the success we have in placing kids to college. I feel like, especially in the big markets, that's maybe the two most important deciding factors for a lot of athletes, even if you know that's not the best thing for athletes. And, you know, as much as we are trying to do what's best for the athletes, a lot of clubs are operating as businesses, where that's a big part of the sell that's directed towards those families. Like, here are the kids that have played in college that have got done playing in our program, and here's the success of the team that we want you to play on from last year. So it's such a tricky situation to balance what's best for the long-term vision of that kid, and promoting those different cross-training and multi-sport situations and what they got going on outside the gym, and balancing what your product is as a club.
And I think just from all of those different angles, you have the coach, you have the athlete, you have the parents, and I think just transparency is really, really important.
Yeah, I think it's so hard as a club, it's so hard to be somewhere in the middle, you know, because that's where I just don't know that you're able to have a true mission as a club if your stance is somewhere in the middle. You know, I think you either set up a system that promotes the multi-sport, or you set up a system that is all about club success, you know.
And you have to live with that. You have to live with whatever that decision is going to be.
Yeah, and it's up to I don't think families always get the true vision from clubs when they're going around trying to figure out what the best fit for them is. And we try as best we can to be like as transparent about our mission. Here's your situation that you have going on volleyball wise and also other sport wise, and whatever stuff we need to talk through is talk through it. It might not always be the answer that you want to hear. You might be a kid that's all volleyball and you want to play the team that's all volleyball. You might not like our answer that we're going to support, your 3 other teammates that are playing basketball, but let's get that figured out before you join the team so that we are staying true to like our mission. And for some other clubs, it might be the opposite way. Like, hey, this national team, to play on it, you have to all be all in on volleyball. It's just interesting to see then what happens after, what happens the next 10 years for those kids.
It's interesting. It's a commitment to the culture versus commitment to the team, and distinguishing what is what to the players and parents. I think everybody needs to know, like, we're committed to this culture, and this culture is promoting multi-sport or not, and we're going to go for as many wins as we can. Volleyball, what I mean? But that's an interesting distinction.
I just don't know. I don't know how you could be in the middle and like operate consistently. Like when is it okay for a multi-sport kid then to play in that top team versus not? Like it's
Inconsistency.
Yeah, it's tough.
Like just over a perspective, right? You want to have the same perspective with the same mentality or same vision, right?
Yep.
But it's a no-win situation. I mean, you put yourself in the middle, then you kind of are fighting the tug of war.
It's the club system too. Like we're all trying to get kids to get a ton of exposure by the time they're older, right? That the system kind of funnels up towards like exposure events and exposure parts of the season. And those weekends, like if you're not at that tournament, you might be hurting yourself, to get seen by this school that you've been talking to forever. If that's something that matters to that school, is seeing you live, So how do you balance that decision between going to this high exposure event or playing basketball with your high school team that weekend? It's really tough.
I think that is an interesting point, and it's definitely relative to the level that you want to play collegiately.
Yeah,
I would say
for sure.
Like, and maybe not in the way that we would naturally think, but that high D1, right? They're going to get their offers whether they're at that tournament or
Correct.
not, right? Because there aren't that many just elite
chips.
athletes. Whereas someone that's maybe more mid-major or D2, D3, who probably has played multiple sports for a while, it might be more advantageous for you to start specializing a little bit earlier in volleyball if you know that's the route that you want to go on, because they're not as athletically gifted or whatever. You're going to have to develop other position skills to a more refined state. You can't just be 5'7" and raw and expect that you're going to just find a great spot to go get kills if you're trying to play at the highest level that you can. So it's an interesting dichotomy from even the athlete. What are they looking for? What are you trying to get? What is that next step once you choose you want to play collegiately or not?
Which I think that's definitely going to be another topic on another episode of just, how can we as, leaders, coaches, yes, but leaders of young people help guide them, ask them the right questions so they can create some authenticity of what they want to do, so we can help them support their decisions that will effectively get them to whatever the goals that they want them to do, right? It's not a one-stop shop or one fit for everybody. I think the last thing I'll talk about is sports specialization, and we can. It's a kind of a large topic, but I just wanted to just Cliff Notes version of kind of your opinions on this. But the parent, I think we haven't talked a lot about the parent's perspective, and their huge point of this, right, is that they're seeing their athlete, especially the multi-sport athletes that are good at multiple things in their high school, small high schools especially, that you have burnout, you have just the overall athlete health part of it, the sleep, the healthy eating. But I think what's creeping up more often is just overall mental health too. Just there's a lot of pressure. I mean, if you don't play, the team's not good or the team doesn't exist. If you don't play well, then it's because you were playing club or whatever else it might be. And that's just a lot of pressure for someone who's developing where and what they want to be. And I just think that we can't forget that part of it, right? The non-volley, the non-technical, the non-development, the non-future from a athlete perspective, but purely that human being and that youth that is trying to develop both physically and mentally.
I think you hit it on the head. Like that's what's the smallest age group in the nation?
What?
What's the smallest age group in the nation? Like what age group has the least amount of teams?
Oh, like the youngest,
Just the smallest quantity of teams. What age?
oh, 18U?
18s, dude.
18U.
18s. 18s. And
Because of that, yeah.
I don't think it's not all because people are graduating early. A lot of it's like, I'm just done. I'm done. I'm done spending every weekend being gone. I want to enjoy my senior year. Don't think I want to play in college. Why would I associate myself to a volleyball team? It's like, I don't know. That's not great, right? Like, you still probably want to play. How can we, as programmers of the sport, create a situation for maybe even 18-year-olds who just want to play every couple weekends?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that would be great. I think the financial implication to the parent side becomes a big determining factor.
Yeah, what's my investment?
What's my financial investment and my time investment for something that potentially my daughter is just doing for fun?
For fun.
Which
right.
that line has a different price point to everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's definitely a factor,
Yeah.
right? The finances of club are continually rising above the rate of inflation, so it's just going to get more and more expensive. What is my time worth as an athlete, as a parent, and what are the goals that we're trying to get? And I think for a lot of parents that have put in or paid for clubs since they're 12, 13, they're expecting some kind of financial benefit at the back end. And some clubs flat out will talk about that. Like, if you start here at 12, you will get most likely some kind of scholarship.
Here's your CBA.
Yeah. Like, here's your return on investment. It's coming.
Yeah.
It will get here. Trust us.
It's crazy.
Keep paying us money
Yeah.
to make sure that we get to that point, which don't necessarily agree with philosophically.
Is that just volleyball? You think that's just a youth travel sports
I think it
issue?
probably is a youth
All
sports
athlete.
overall.
All sports.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Agreed. So now that we've talked a little bit about just the specialization on the sport perspective, let's kind of dive more into just the positional specialization. So I guess when do you think that ball should be called? And does it matter by position? I think we all probably have some opinions on that. We'll start maybe, Frank, from a development perspective.
Yeah, I think we try and look at it as a very individual case scenario, especially as they get older. But when they're young, like our 11s and 12s, we'll have like 4 setters on that team. We'll have a bunch of setters, a bunch of bumpers, and a bunch of spikers. And like those are because of kind of their positions.
I love it.
And that kind of trickles into 13s a little bit. Sometimes we get some really advanced 13s who are probably more true spikers than they are setters. But by the time they get to high school, we evaluate them as individual athletes first, and that's how we try to like evaluate them and team place them almost. So we've gone away for a few years now. We've gone away from calling someone outside. We just call them a pin. And now, so we have pins, we have middle/pins, because we don't like to put anyone as just a middle. We just don't think that makes sense. I feel like we're limiting them a bit on skill acquisition if you just make them a middle. And then we have DSs, and then we have setters. And that's kind of, we don't get more specific than that even on our most competitive teams. So we know this kid probably might play some left side mostly, but we're going to train her on both pins. We're going to train her how to try and score in multiple different parts of the court. We feel like that makes her more of an asset come college volleyball. Sometimes we get the occasional setter/hitter. That's great. We want her to do both. We've tiered the club a bit where our top teams still have a lot of that, broad training, and then everyone else gets 6 rotation training. So our twos to our fours teams, everyone's kind of like a spiker again. We have middles who also play right side and outside. Again, small rosters. We That's our mission. So like parents have to be good with that coming in. Our mission is development over winning and allowing those kids to acquire different skills. We feel like that's a more recruitable trait by the time those kids get to college.
I completely agree. I think for a lot of these kids, again, if you're the top, you're probably an outside. You probably know that. You've probably been an outside, and that's where the college sees you. But if you're not, how are you adding more value than what you can just do from a one position perspective? So I think an interesting parallel across sports that we're seeing is this, especially in basketball, is positionless basketball, right? When you talk about the NBA, it's you got to be able to guard all five. And that's how they're determining their value is what else can you bring? So I think training spikers, as Frank called,
Love a spiker.
right, at all three of those positions, or making sure that your middles have opportunities to swing right and left and ball handle, because ultimately at 14, they're still going through puberty. We're still growing. We're still figuring out our bodies and how to move and how all that works. We think we have a good idea of what that might look like in a couple years, but ultimately a kid hits an 8-inch growth spurt that nobody's ready for. Suddenly she's going to have to learn a lot of new skills that took her from potentially being a DS or a small setter to now she's a huge setter or an outside middle. So what does that look like? And I think specializing early puts them at a distinct disadvantage in that. Like you're putting them into a box from that beginning. And what I appreciated about Frank's comments was it's about the training perspective. Whenever you're on the court and we're keeping score, you're going to play what you're going to play. But when you're practicing, are you allowing the opportunities to be uncomfortable learning different things, which is a theme from one of our other shows?
Yeah, I think the interesting situations for really good clubs is if a kid commits to a school as a right side, or let's say as an outside, but they're playing right side for you, how do you navigate that situation as a club coach? You know, like, do I play this kid now mostly on the outside because I want to prepare her for her next 4 years, or do I keep her on the right side because that's what makes us the best team? You know, I feel like sometimes you're almost weighing that decision of what's best for the team and our club success this year and what's best for this kid.
I think a lot of times the answer is yes, and try to give reps everywhere you can.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back. I love your comment on just like those young athletes. You just don't know what they are yet. And you also don't know what they're going to gravitate to. You don't know what they're going to be good at. They might be elite at something, but they haven't tried that elite thing yet. Or haven't had the ability to do that because their body is not ready yet, or whatever it might be. And the whole fact of just putting them putting the biggest kid in the middle and then just leaving him in the middle, I think is such a detriment to our sport over like decades. And we're kind of coming out of that now, right? Actually, it's kind of flipped into a different thing: is put the biggest kid, make her the setter. I think it's letting them kind of just evolve as they want to decide on what positions that they want to play. I do think just take the position out. I think we would all agree that all of our players need to be able to play front and back row. Like in the development stages, it is so critical. If you're a middle out there listening, or a parent of a middle out there listening, and you're never getting any back row reps, you need to get back row reps.
Yeah. You need to look for an opportunity where you're going to be able to train out of the back row. And the earlier it is the bigger red flag that this probably isn't the best situation for you to be in for overall development.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
There's so many more avenues that can go down, right? You know, the impact to that player, the relationship between what they do in high school versus what they're doing in club versus they're doing in college. You touched a little bit on that, Frank. But a lot of great discussion today on just overall multi-sport athletes and when do you call the ball and why do you call the ball and all the different impacts. But bottom line, it's not easy. And I think clubs get a lot of pressure on that. They're also kind of in a no-win situation either. So I think it's all about what's best for you. that's our episode for today. But thanks for listening. Remember to check us out on all of the socials at Triple Blockheads. Just spell that triple out. And we look forward to the next episode.
Go Spikers! Go Spikers!
Thanks for checking out this episode of Triple Blockheads. Make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode.